How many female serial killers do you think there are in the UK? If you thought about it, most people might say maybe 5 or 6 or a handful. Or if you're FBI profiler Roy Hazelwood, you might say that as recently as 1998, there is no such thing as a female serial killer. This is in fact completely false, and my research shows that not only are there many female serial killers, there were hundreds operating in England and in the US in the 19th century. And that brings me to the 2 female serial killers I want to talk to you about today. So as you'll see on the screen, female serial killers of the 19th century, both in England and the US, are vastly underrepresented. Part of this is due to a cultural decision to suppress stories of female violence because violent women transgressed against the angel in the house ideal. But Delphine Lalaurie, as you'll see here, was a socialite and serial killer in 1834 New Orleans who operated an attic torture chamber. Her story was pretty much completely faded from the cultural imagination until the popular horror franchise American Horror Story decided to bring her back to life on screen as the primary villain of their 3rd season, American Horror Story Coven. Same is true for serial killer Lucille Sharp, although Lucille, unlike Delphine, was not based on a specific historical figure. Horror director Guillermo del Toro did create Lucille from an amalgamation of British female serial killers, including Betty Eccles, Mary Ann Cotton, Sarah Chesham, and Catherine Wilson, just to name a few, all of whom used poison as their primary weapon. So why is this significant? It's interesting, but why do the stories of female serial killers in the 19th century matter in the here and now? Well, I argue that the way Coven and Crimson Peak represent Sharp and Lalaurie's stories is significant because of the way they choose to represent these stories. Both texts use their female serial killers not so much to make a comment on the mad, bad, or unhinged women of the 19th century in the way that many 19th century Gothic texts do. Rather, they point out that the murders that both of these women committed were motivated by racism, sexism, and their relationship with the class systems in their respective societies. They also struggled with internalized misogyny, which caused both characters to believe that only by instilling fear in others, only through committing acts of violence, could they be seen and heard and respected in a patriarchal society that suppressed them. So rather than asking whether they were unhinged, the texts argue that Lalaurie and Sharp's characters speak rather to the societal structure, not to them as individuals, but to the fact that societies which are built on principles of inequality, such as racism, classism, and discrimination against women, create inherent vulnerabilities that lead to victimization. So drawing on Amy King's theory of monstrous whiteness as seen in Coven, I argue that Sharp and Lalaurie's characters are significant because they literally haunt the present. In Coven's case, Delphine literally comes to life in the present, reminding us that the societal issues that were relevant in the 19th century remain relevant today. Thank you.